Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of From No Crypto to No Crypto. I'm your host, the Crypto Coach, Blockchain Wayne. Today we're joined by Jake with Bleeding Edge Capital. Jake, man, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Wayne, for having me. I'm excited to talk all things crypto. It's a little bloody at the time of the recording, but I personally get excited when Mr. Market gives me discounts. I could not be happier with Bitcoin this year. People are forgetting it's pulling 100%.
Yeah,
It's an exciting time to be talking about it.
yeah,
So,
absolutely, man. You got to zoom out, not have that short term view, and like you, like when the market gives us these gifts, you can't complain about them. So, man, I
amen.
love your handle. JT knows things, so we're going to talk about some things here today. But man, before we jump into a lot of those things, can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, kind of your background, and what got you into this industry, or at least diving into the world of crypto and Web3?
Of course. I've always kind of been really interested in technology. So I was little. I built my first computer, with my old man, when I was maybe 13, and then kind of got hooked, never got off a computer. I learned how to code in high school, going into college, started a software development company. Then I exited that business when I graduated college, and then I went, had a few startups, and been doing enterprise level software development consulting, so helping development teams actually scale and build enterprise applications and things. And throughout my journey, I've met a lot of successful business owners, and I've always known a lot about crypto. I really like crypto, and they saw the kind of returns I was doing with a long strategy, and they asked if I could manage their money for them in crypto, and it's just kind of evolved into this hedge fund now called Bleeding Edge Capital, where I manage a diverse portfolio of 44 tokens that I've researched from the ground up using my computer science background as, a full stack guy. I've developed, I've tested, I've brought products to market, I've founded products, I've designed them, I've done it all. So this space feels exactly like a perfect mesh of what I love doing, which is just analyzing and making money. So it's a lot of fun.
Nice, man. And you recently started a podcast as well too. Can you tell everybody about that one?
Yeah, Bullish and Beyond. It is brand spanking new, but I have a wonderful co-host. So that's my background. His background is, he had a very significant exit in his mid 30s. He's gotten amazing returns personally for the past 15 years, and it's all in stocks. We have the same strategy, same view, go long on tech because nothing else will really even be close to tech in the future. And you can already see that in the valuations today. So, we both have the exact same philosophy, but we know a lot about different things, and there's not a lot of overlap. So we cover everything in tech as it pertains to stocks and crypto, and we give an update on the markets every week.
Nice. So make sure to check that out. Bullish and Beyond. What you said, your top platform where most people follow you on?
Apple Podcasts.
Apple Podcast.
That's probably our biggest one.
Nice, nice. All right, man. So let's dive in. Bleeding Edge Capital, um, hedge fund, right? What what has that process been like? Because I know the sentiment on crypto is changing. A lot of people like you, myself, like we've been bullish for the long term, right? What are you
Mhm.
seeing today with the market the way it's been? Not necessarily just this week. I mean,
Right.
not the micro, but when you look at say the past 6 months, how have you seen things shift or change in terms of from because for your hedge fund, right? You're mainly dealing with accredited investors, larger, firms and stuff. So what are you seeing from them?
Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of interest. They're not very concerned with the prices right now. They're more long term. I mean, if you're talking to anyone that is going to be more sophisticated in investing in general, they're going to have a long term outlook. They're going to be patient. And, Michael Saylor is famously quoted, I'll keep buying the top
Yeah.
because, it's Lindy's law. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, the longer something has, has existed, it is most or more likely that it'll exist in the future. So if Bitcoin has been around for 17 years versus 7 years, it's more likely to be here for another 17 versus another 7. and that kind of compounds. So like the fact that Bitcoin crushed 100K and became larger than silver in 16 years. Because remember, I'm the institutions, they zoom out. So I
Nice.
mean, it passed silver in 16 years, and what's the likelihood it could pass gold in the next 8? Well, it just became a lot more likely. And that would be a $15 trillion market cap. That would put Bitcoin right around a million a token. So they're still seeing this as a very cheap entry because they are sophisticated. I think a lot of unsophisticated people are putting cash on the side.
Hmm.
And I think, I mean, me personally, I'm pulling profits because I entered in 22 because I'm long term. And that's kind of my strategy. I just pull profits in bulls. I don't care if I miss out on 30% of my money, 40% of my money, because I'm locking in a 4x for my principal, anyways,
Hmm.
right? Because crypto's crazy. And then you just leave what's in there and you buy more when it goes really cheap because I only buy good things. I don't, I'm an investor, not a trader. Those are two different things entirely.
Man, a lot of what you said there is really good. And, to unpack some of that, you talk about the sophisticated versus the unsophisticated, man. And that kind of mentality is great. In 2017, I helped a group of people kind of get started in crypto, helped them set up some initial investments. And then when the market, started to crash in 2018, um, I was trying to tell them about that long term mentality, but these weren't institutions or firms. It was just individuals that like, hey, I need help with how to do this, and I'm sure it was a different scenario for you where, I think if they are worried about prices when the market goes down, they're like, let's put some more capital in. And I had one guy that was like that, and he did the best because every time things got bloody, he was like, I'm putting another 20K in. And everybody else was like, should I take out now? Is it going to zero? Eventually, I got out of that. Like I was only in that for a little while, where I was kind of helping those guys, and I can see
Yeah.
the difference. And even the unsophisticated person, I witnessed this last week on a flight. I was wearing, I wear Bitcoin gear, right? I was getting off. I had a Bitcoin sweater on, and I'm walking out, and the pilot's coming out the cockpit at the same time. And he's like, man, I bet you're pretty happy right now. Things are good. I said, yeah. He says, yeah, I missed out on it, man. It's I wish I'd have got in early, but I missed it. I said, I tried to explain to him real quick why he didn't miss out. Like it's still early. Like you have to zoom out and look at where this is going. And he just kept insisting, oh no, it's too late. It's too late. And
Yeah.
it's just
Like I said, the unsophisticated are going to put money on the side. I don't like buying at these prices right now, but there is some game I'll drop here. It helps a lot. The price of Bitcoin in its cycles, everyone looks at it from a logarithmic scale and all this stuff. And if you're a technical analyst, you swear by it that price prediction theory is the blah, 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 and I just wholeheartedly disagree. There's real economics at play, in my opinion. And if you look at the correlation of Bitcoin's price relative to the cost to produce Bitcoin, that'll tell you a very interesting story. Right now, we're only roughly 60% in profit for the cost to produce a new Bitcoin. As we approach 200 to 300%, you'll start seeing a massive correction. It's been like that every time. It just so happens that the cost to produce a Bitcoin on the very first halving was very cheap.
right. Yeah.
Okay, because you got a lot of Bitcoin and inflation didn't happen for 16 years. So you can rewind 30, 40 plus percent of the purchasing power. Like, turns out making a block was really cheap, or I'm sorry, making a Bitcoin was super cheap back then. But that correlation is held true. And right now would be like buying Bitcoin in the previous bull market at maybe 35,000. It was probably 23 to 25K to make back then. So, there's room. There's not as much as, you would think or, see. Maybe Trump will extend this FOMO even further and pump it to holy hell. But at a certain point, you're going to have miners sitting on too much sell pressure.
Yeah.
And they don't sell in little chunks because they got a lot of Bitcoin. That's their strategy. They take on debt. They risk bankruptcy to get more Bitcoin. So
Yeah. I never looked at it that way, but it kind of makes sense because a lot of people would track what certain miners are holding, right? And even if that miner sells an OTC deal, right, and it doesn't actually hit an exchange, other people that are watching that is like, okay, they're going to start taking action based on what they see. Because there's so much more that can happen in this market, and we have so much more data to view with like what's happened with movements on chain, not just what shows up on a brokerage or a trading exchange.
Leverage.
Yeah,
So once there's like a black swan event, enough miners are wanting to lock in profit that they don't really care anymore. If you go from 60 solid, let's just go back in time, 67 to 50 in a day because of Do Kwon being a fraud,
yeah,
you're selling. And then when they sold, we went from 50 to 36 in the following 24 hours because there was a lot of leverage at 50. There's a lot of leverage at 40. There's even more at 30. So when those price points keep hitting these margin calls, you're going to have leverage get sucked out, and it's like the air has left the room. And that's why you have a 50% drawdown in a week, marking the start of a bear market. And it's like you don't need a lot. If miners are sitting on tens of millions of dollars of profit, and one black, like even like a hint of things like Tether being removed from Coinbase, it might just be enough to scare them to sell 30% of their Bitcoin that they are sitting on, you know,
yeah,
because their treasury is a lot cheaper Bitcoin than what you would think because they've been mining a long time, dollar cost averaging, right?
yeah,
So they could have a 9-figure paycheck making us exit liquidity. They're going to do that. They have a fiduciary responsibility to do that.
yeah.
So, until we get too big for that to matter, it'll be like that.
Yeah. And I think that's what people need to prepare for both. Like a lot of people are optimistic that what Trump will do actually kick off kind of like a lot of other countries that'll be looking at reserves, and it could blow the top off of this thing. But there's just as much likelihood there could be some kind of black swan event like we've seen in the past, whether it's Do Kwon or FTX or anything else that could, that could make the market go in the opposite direction. So, what's your take? You mentioned a second ago. I know you deal a lot with, with larger, more educated investors and stuff. But to the average person, and if I tell them they're just getting into something like, say, Bitcoin or maybe a few other like high cap, it's like dollar cost average. If you're not a trader, you don't understand how to trade the markets. Trading looks easy to the person from the outside. They're like, oh yeah, buy low, sell high, but it's not as easy when you're actually in action. Just like the same people that are
Hmm.
watching NFL game on Sundays and think they know what should have happened.
Hmm. I know. I can't give financial advice, but I can give my opinion. I would always think that if you have no idea what you're doing, I would avoid going outside of the top 30 in market cap. Like just scroll down the first page of Coin Market Cap. I would do your best to read those websites
Yeah,
and Google every word that you don't understand. That's how you should start instead of trying to find people like me or Wayne that make content and you don't know who we are. Like, you should definitely come to your own conclusions and just invest in what you feel, whatever you have developed conviction on as you read.
yeah,
And I think you'll be okay. I mean, the top 30 have been fleshed out a lot over time. They end up in a lot of professional fund managers' portfolios. I have access to that data. A lot of the top 30 are in our portfolios. We care about risk a lot. And especially if you're long term, you don't want to be long in something that has a higher possibility of failing. So, you know, that's usually what I think will return the best over the long term. You might get lucky in these meme coins and these, it's just garbage though. It's 99% garbage. I think it is great for crypto adoption. You got a lot of new wallets turning on, you got network fees going up, you got transactions going up. I'm happy. My Solana is very happy. Okay. I was buying it at a 97% correction
yeah,
because of continuous block streams, which is a super nerdy thing to invest in, but I knew it was powerful. And we're seeing what that means now. It means you can buy 100 NFTs with $100 versus Ethereum where you can only do two. So if people are feeling more poor, they're going to want to speculate with cheaper fees. And here we are. I
Yeah.
mean, Solana has absolutely crushed the speculative markets. Um,
Yeah. And you're benefiting from some of that meme coin hype without the risk of putting in the meme coins because that network usage is high. Um, all good
just
points,
to
man. Yeah,
move block
definitely. I always
space.
tell people do their own research, and there's tools that I didn't have when I first got started. I mean, that are available now. Even like you said, Google a word you don't understand. Hell, if you're reading an article or you see something that you don't really understand, use AI to help give you a summary, a breakdown of it, man. I was just
Hmm.
telling somebody on a call earlier, like, dude, you can take this information, dump it into, I don't know if you've heard of Google's Notebook LM. It's an AI tool. It's kind of like it's not an LLM. It's a like you create your own topics. I actually created an AI generated podcast that we launched 30 days ago, and it's got 30 episodes already because it's automatically generating episodes from the content that
That's
I plug in.
crazy.
But it creates like your own little mini chat GBT box to where I can say, I can dump this article in and it can give me a summary, a breakdown. It can, highlight certain points for me, or it can generate a 2-person podcast audio about it. And so if you don't know what something means, you can go into there, get a summary, or you don't want to read a 50-page report, right? Drop that in there, get it to give you a summary. And so the tools out there, there's a lot better tools already. And then you factor in AI. There's so much people can do. But I can tell you, man, what I tell people too, and this is kind of same thing. It's just my personal opinion. If I were starting a day, I would start with Bitcoin and I would just start dollar cost averaging while I learn about these other things. But my best performing investment by far has been January 2017. I set up a $50 weekly recurring buy of Bitcoin every Friday. And that's been running ever since. And that's outperformed a lot of the times I've tried to trade or invest in ICOs or any of this other crap, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I that's a great point. I think I'm still leaning too hard into my background. Like
Yeah.
Bitcoin to me, because I really understand it, is not a lot of the dream they sell is not good. Like it can only process kilobytes a second.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if we got to any form of peer-to-peer payment system, the queue time would be worse than Swift. I would be waiting months for the mempool to clear a transaction.
Yeah.
And the cost for a block would be in the thousands. Now, when you're moving 10 billion of cash reserves, as an example, that's a great deal. And
Oh,
since no one can do it cheap, you're not being bogged down by all the retail use of the network, which makes Bitcoin even a stronger asset for a store of value for governments.
yeah.
But if you and I trying to buy coffee is happening on Bitcoin, while they're also doing that, I'm telling you, the future's dead. So it can't be that. It can't even be Ethereum. It's most likely going to be Ethereum 10 years after they follow through with their roadmap, or just a faster network and a better network that is built before Ethereum can catch up.
Yeah.
I listen to every single talk at DevCon. I'm very aware of Ethereum. They're just really behind in a lot of the things. I mean, just look at the price action. Look how many how many transactions they're getting on the network compared to Solana.
Yeah.
Solana, for the first time ever, has more new developer wallets than Ethereum. So, it's there is going to be something that is adopted at a greater rate. And I think it will be the weirdest thing will be it's an Ethereum virtual machine. I think the EVM is stronger than Ethereum, the network itself.
Yeah.
EVM has a great standard, you know?
Yeah. And even like Bitcoin, Ethereum, not everything needs to be on a layer one, right? You can have layer twos, layer threes that are specialized to do certain things that roll up and may have the security of the underlying network as well in terms of
Hmm.
provenance. But the thing about Bitcoin, even what you mentioned about gold, like are people running out and spending gold? Yeah, gold has this huge market cap. No, they're spending the weaker currency, which is the dollar, which is whatever. So Bitcoin will always have its place. And that's what I try to like. I teach people it's not like I'm a Bitcoin maximalist. It's Bitcoin. To me, it's Bitcoin first. Understand what Bitcoin does, what its place is, because if not, you're going to get wooed away by just fast transactions. But everything's got its place. There's a lot of things that Solana can do that Bitcoin can't. But Bitcoin, Bitcoin can serve its purpose. Bitcoin is like it's simple, but there's beauty in that simplicity, and people want to overcomplicate it. Bitcoin doesn't need to do everything. It can be our hard money, and then we can have these networks like Solana and other EVM chains that are really doing groundbreaking stuff that we're going to have a lot of those transactions on. And people finally starting to realize that. You're finally starting to see some some layer twos that are being built on Bitcoin that are unique, that are doing some things that Bitcoin couldn't do before. So that's kind of how I look at it is Bitcoin doesn't have to do everything. It doesn't have to be fast, but hey, when I need censorship resistant transaction, I know I can do that, right? Or like you said, if I'm moving a ton of money, then that's what it's being used for. So I always try to compare that to gold. You don't expect gold to do a whole lot other than just appreciate in value because of what it's valued against. And that's kind of where I see Bitcoin going. Outside of that,
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much other tech. It's just everything. And that's what I want people to realize. Everything's got to have its place, right? You
Mhm.
need that network adoption. You need transactions to happen. And I told people that for years. Like the same when I go to buy a piece of real estate and I can pay in Bitcoin, that's great. But I'm not going to use Bitcoin when I walk into, a grocery store and buy some milk and eggs.
No. I don't know if I'd ever use Bitcoin for a transaction personally. Um, I just couldn't imagine it being a good decision ever. Like, just because I know how terrible the dollar is. Like, dollar to everyone else, I want to be clear because some people do go down this really negative rabbit hole. The dollar to everyone else is amazing. It's dollar to dollar, meaning go back 5 years, go back 10 years on the dollar. We've now entered the thing that every other country's doing, and we were the last to sit down at the table, but we're all eating spoiled food. Ours just is the freshest.
Yeah.
Maybe one day out of the garbage can, And if you even underwrite how gold peaked this year,
Hmm.
did 100%, okay? If you were to denominate gold under Bitcoin uh protected 70% more buying power than the gold did, even at 100% return.
Yeah.
That's how much money they've put in the system, one. And two, that's how more effective Bitcoin is at that. If you denominate anything in Bitcoin, it'll make you sick. Like in America, the median home price. That went from 7 to 9 Bitcoin, somewhere in that range, to now 3 to 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's going to be like like literally, you'll be able to buy $1 million home with 1 Bitcoin, guys. Like eventually, it's going to be a fraction of a Bitcoin for something like that. It's going to be crazy, I think.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And to
it'd be
go
hard for me to sell Bitcoin.
Yeah,
Be
and to go,
hard.
I mean that's kind of why I recommend Bitcoin. It's not You're not going to get rich quick, but if you want to preserve your wealth, preserve your buying power, and potentially increase it, that's why I teach people to start with the basics and then start learning about these other networks and what they do. And when you start to understand and differentiate, you see what adds value in different places. But yeah, it's funny. I've got a friend in Vegas, and he 2017 he bought a Lamborghini with Bitcoin, and his license plate, if you ever see it in Vegas, his license plate is 40 BTC. That's his license plate number. And it just tells you kind of where he'd be. That $250,000 car is would that Bitcoin, if he'd have kept that Bitcoin, that's 4 million. Right. So
Right. 4 million versus 112, 115,000 maybe on that Lambo. Um, Still a nice car, but I wouldn't have wanted to spend Bitcoin to buy it.
oh,
If anything, I would borrow cash against my Bitcoin and go spend that thing. If I had high income to cover the debt service. Because you can get tax right. Like there's benefits to doing it like that, and that's what the rich do. You buy assets and then you take leverage on it, and you just make sure that whatever you use that money for can get you a return on the cost of your capital. And you're printing money. I mean, it's what the government does. I mean, they're arbing GDP. I mean, they've been bad at it the past 20 years. They're supposed to be arbing GDP. So,
yeah, yeah,
they're
it's
not
funny.
good at it.
Right.
They can't manage a budget, but that's supposed to be what they're doing. Everyone does it. They use their assets, their GDP to borrow money from the central banks.
Yeah.
So yeah, everyone's doing it.
Yeah, and that's when people have that whole mindset of, and I heard that recently, whereas, well, when would you sell your Bitcoin? It's like never, and it's like, well, how you're ever supposed to profit on it? And you're right. I mean, borrowing against that, especially when the cost of borrow is technically so cheap right now, why not? Even
Mhm.
even if that same guy that bought that Lambo would have took out a loan, been able to carry the payments for say a few years, and then even then he decided to pay off that loan by selling some of the Bitcoin. It could have been a fraction of that. He gave up 3 or 4 Bitcoin instead of the 40. But
Yeah.
you hear a lot of those stories, right? People that bought Bitcoin with stuff in the early days. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people that were on Silk Road that have probably smoked more Bitcoin, what
Yeah.
smoked more and worth than what they could have. Probably an entire state spends on.
100%. It's why, on my channel, in my podcast, I tell everyone, like, you just need to know things. You got to be educated. You got to educate yourself because if you don't know what Bitcoin is, you would have sold. It doesn't matter when you bought it. I
Right.
don't care if you rewound time in 2011. If you didn't know what it was, you would have sold it when it ran from $1 to 100. It's gone. I mean, and it's why you need to know what it is and you need to do the work. You need to understand the asset because everything we've just talked about, that takes work to get to that point, and it is the best decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and if you're not comfortable with it, you just don't know enough, or you have too much in the market, or, you're doing something you shouldn't because it makes no sense for you to even want to swipe anything for Bitcoin. Okay, it just makes no sense.
Yeah. And
Um,
Jake, this is a great point to start to get to the point where we wrap up because one, I'm gonna I recommend, we mentioned your podcast earlier. Recommend everybody listen to that as well. What you're talking about is things that people aren't taught in school. You've got to get this education somewhere, right? Because if you don't know that, that's where you're going to have that mentality where they're going to get into, Bitcoin. Because it's funny, your scenarios are the same thing. I tell people, yeah, if you'd have got in 10 years ago or 12 years ago or 13 years ago, you would have sold already if you didn't really understand this. And so that's why it's important to have that education. And that's why people they struggle to grasp, how can this even be worth anything? And then
mhm.
year after year or year over the long term, you zoom out, the whole market is moving up. Technology adoption is happening more, and people still are struggling to figure out, how is this worth anything when it's just some, numbers in a computer somewhere that I don't understand. And again, they don't even understand the principles of wealth. How do wealthy people maintain their wealth? They don't spend all their assets. They accumulate assets that appreciate in value, and they leverage debt. And people think debt is bad. Yeah, certain types of debt can be really bad for you, but from a mindset of accumulation, debt can be leveraged very well instead of just getting rid of your assets that'll appreciate over time.
Mhm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I have plenty of investors and friends and clients that, I mean, they have $40 million of debt.
Yeah,
They got $100 million in debt, but it's on 200 million of real estate that's producing, it's a six cap, an average of a six cap. So, you know, crazy money. I mean, that's millions a month for people that can't do math at home. And, their debt doesn't cost that. It costs half that.
yeah,
So they're crushing it. And all of the tenants are paying off their asset. And they can basically take out a line of credit on on that entire portfolio whenever they need
mm,
to buy something. Um, yeah. And those same people don't keep more than 100 grand in a bank account.
right,
They invest everything. They stay hungry. They don't like seeing that number. If they see money in their account, they feel pressured to deploy it into something. And that's why hedge funds like me exist.
yeah,
That's why I'm out here. It's to help people like that could go get scammed for $1 million because they don't know what they're doing.
yeah,
Um, because it could whatever you put in, you got to be willing to lose. And there's probably 2 million people trying to take your crypto right now, like, including North Korea. It's a global thing. Anyone in the world can do that. There's governments trying to take your stuff. So, just stay careful.
Absolutely. Jake, man, as we wrap up, can you tell everybody where they can follow you, find out more about what you're doing? Best place to connect?
Yeah, the best landing page for me is going to be JT Knows Things, no spaces, just that handle will get you to me anywhere, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. And then Jake Tullis on LinkedIn. If you're really into LinkedIn, that is my biggest platform. So reach out.
All right. Make sure to give Jake a follow. Thanks, man, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure having you on. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode. Take care, everybody.